What's up, everybody? Good morning. We have a great show for you today on GoJo and Golic that is just about to start. Some of the things that we are going to get into today. The Chiefs doink AFC West champs again for the 9th straight year. They keep getting it done, and it just keeps being incredible. So we will talk about that Sunday night football game. Plus, Juan Soto, he has signed, and he has a $75 million signing bonus. The size of this contract is simply unbelievable. We'll break it all down. And the college football playoffs are set, and the SEC is not happy. We'll talk about all that and more coming up on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here. We are presented by Campbell's Chunky, or were for a long time, and maybe not now anymore. Either way, you should check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, all those fun places here. You can tell I'm Ron Burgundy sometimes, and when things change abruptly, your boy is always a little bit of a step behind here. As Jesse mentioned, though, awesome show for you guys to check out today here. Marshall Newhouse, as always, will join us in the second hour to break down some of the stuff around the National Football League, as well as look ahead to Monday Night Football. And Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard going to join us at 9 o'clock Eastern today, fresh off of the news that his Notre Dame-led Fighting Irish are now going to be heading to the college football playoff. They will be hosting a first-round playoff game against in-state. It's not even in-state rival, Dad. Someone asked me about this yesterday. They're like, do you guys have any feelings about Indiana football? I know Purdue's got the little brother thing, and you have so many of these different rivalries. And I said, no, it's been so long that since Indiana football has even registered on the Richter scale in that way, and these teams, we never really played them, that I have no real feelings of malice towards Indiana, and so I will start working on them now. Hoosiers, I have been a fan of you all year, but make no mistake, I will burn you down next week.
Oh, yeah. It's about finding things that we hate about Indiana. No, not the state, obviously, the college. Yeah, because there is no rivalry there. There is no series there. There is nothing there. It was more with Purdue, obviously, than Indiana. It was with Purdue for a long time. So there is nothing there. It's not the cold matchup that the cold weather cities that are hosting, like Penn State, Ohio State, Notre Dame, we're hoping for a warm weather team to come visit frigid cold, maybe 2 feet of snow, South Bend. You're going to get Indiana players who are just as used to the cold weather. So throw that one out the window.
Yep, exactly. All that goes out the window, but a very good football game gets ready to waltz its way into South Bend. We'll obviously talk about that matchup here. The big discrepancy coming off the committee's decision whether or not to validate conference championships or strength of schedule. I'll talk about why I have a big problem with what Alabama Athletic Director Greg Byrne and others are trying to throw out into the universe. But, Dad, before we get to any football, you were in the middle of calling Sunday Night Football on Westwood One last night as the Kansas City Chiefs punched their ticket into the playoffs again by nature of winning the AFC West. They beat the Chargers in typical walk-off fashion for that series. But while all that's going on, Juan Soto in this big money contract grabbed the sports world by the throat and refused to let it go. The announcement came late last night that Juan Soto, the unbelievable 26-year-old star hitter, signs a 15-year, $765 million deal to walk across town to the New York Mets. Dad, how big is this, not only in terms of the contract and the sheer tonnage of money that are going to bring one of the brightest young talents in the sport, but the fact that it is with the New York Mets and not the other team wearing pinstripes across town the way that we're used to seeing?
Well, listen, you know there are just a handful of teams that can afford this kind of contract, so you knew he was only going to go to one of a few places. And the Yankees put in a good offer. Basically, their offer was $47.5 million a year, and the Mets was $51 million a year. Now, if you're deciding because of the $3.5 million, okay, listen, you're the one signing the deal. More power to you. It's a big load of money any way you look at it. So no, I'm not shocked. Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, has a boatload of money. Like I said, they're one of the haves in the league. So this was a Juan Soto decision. And one of the big decisions is, and maybe this had something to do with it as well, is he did not defer any money. We talked last week how the Dodgers have over $1 billion in deferred money. Now, most of that is Shohei, because Shohei is making, $70 million a year, but deferring $68 million of it a year and only taking $2 million in salary. So that really skewed what the deferred money the Dodgers owed are. Juan Soto, he wants his money and he wants it now. He's got nothing deferred. $75 million signing bonus, averages out to $51 million a year. It actually has an escalator clause, a 5-year out clause, that if he were to exercise it, would actually go up $4 million more dollars. He would then average $55 million a year. I mean, that's and the deal would be worth over $800 million. He's 26. This will go to 41. We know the back end of these deals. There's not a whole lot to them, but oh my God. I mean, just if this is now setting the precedent going forward, just think of the young 22, 23-year-old stars in the league, what they have to look forward to.
Well, I mean, Dad, this is one of those, though, where you also recognize what a unicorn it is. A guy who's 26 who a couple of years ago turned down a $440 million extension or whatever it was, to have the gall and the foresight to do that. And then to go out and do what he did this season, going over to the Yankees and hitting an absurd slash line, showing up big in the postseason for them en route to a World Series trip for that team. He bet on himself, and much like Joe Flacco in that season that culminated in the Super Bowl years ago for the Ravens, he hit on it at the exact right time, combined with having a skill set like this that really, since Alex Rodriguez, we have not seen come to the open market as young as it was. A-Rod, another Scott Boras client who signed that monster deal a couple decades before this, that ends up setting the standard in a way that really, to this magnitude, this kind of jump forward for a hitter this young, because we've again seen other guys get monster paydays. You mentioned Shohei Ohtani as recently as last year. But again, to see a 26-year-old walking into the prime of his career do this is just such a different level. And the fact that it is with the Mets, Dad, and to your point, Steve Cohen, the message sent by this coming off an NLCS appearance last year where they faced and lost to the Dodgers in 6 games for a team that has always been second fiddle in that town when it's come to baseball and been associated with all of the problems that come with the Et side of town in New York. This is a decided planting of the flag. To your point, it was 16 years, $760 million as the offer from the Yankees. Now, we don't know if there was a similar escalator to what you described in the contract he ultimately ended up signing with the Mets, which, you know, the difference between $760 and $800 million now starting to add up a little bit more. But as much as anything, the fact that there was any part of the pitch from the Mets that could match or exceed what was going on the other side of town in the Bronx with the Yankees, I don't know, Dad. It becomes very interesting. Like, there are going to be people that certainly lament where we're at in baseball, that there are, like you said, only a few teams, a handful of halves in the sport that can go out and compete for the players of this caliber here. But Juan Soto is a very unique situation that was always going to price out most teams. I'm sorry, Red Sox fans, but you knew that was never going to be real. But on the other side of it, Dad, it's the fact that we're talking about that with the Mets, who, yes, right now financially are one of the halves, but historically are one of the inept franchises that we think about in the world of sports, or at the very least one of the most scorned on the other side of town. And so this is one where, of the choices between the Dodgers and the Yankees and the teams that were bantered about with this, the Mets do feel like one that at the very least opens a door that we feel like we haven't seen open in quite some time.
Well, yeah, and the Mets can't be done, right? Because the Dodgers, the headline was Shohei Ohtani, but they signed others as well to big money deals, right? We talk about the deferrals of over $1 billion. That's through like 5, 6, 7 players. So the Mets can't be done. They need help with starting pitching. And obviously, Scott Boras has clients who are out there that are starting pitchers. So you wonder what the discussion was with the Mets and Ron Soto and some of other Scott Boras clients out there that need homes who are starting pitchers, because you know the Mets should not be done. Just like the Dodgers were not done. The Juan Soto deal will be the headline, just like the Shohei Ohtani deal was the headline. But you still need other spots to fill in.
You certainly do, and fill in around an unbelievable talent at this spot, though, and a couple of things. Shout out to Sarah Langs and the Elias Sports Bureau on some of these stats, just showing the kind of player the Mets have now planted their flag around here. Juan Soto is 26 years old and has played in the postseason with 3 different teams. Only one player has done that with 4 different teams by the time they've reached 30. He's also made an all-star game in 3 straight seasons with 3 different teams. No player has ever done that with four straight seasons with 4 different teams. No other player has even made the All-Star game for a 4th different team before turning 31 years old. And he's one of 9 players with multiple postseason home runs for 3 different teams. No player has hit multiple postseason runs for 3 different teams. And Dad, that's just it. He's the rare player that combines this regular season prowess with postseason stats as well. He's shown up in the biggest spots for teams that have gone into the postseason, lifted hardware, and done the things we routinely demand of our stars. And so while you have, Rob Manfred in the league bantering around the golden at bat idea to try and get more guys like this up to the plate, Juan Soto is one of the reasons why, because when he gets into those spots, he tends to deliver in the way that most don't. And that's why he is now the proud owner of a payday that is the GDP of a small country, the largest contract in the history of professional sports. And Dad, I don't know, we're used to some of these big time numbers in baseball, but this one still found a way to take my breath away. Even though we knew he was going to command well over what Shohei made, we knew none of it was going to be deferred. Seeing this for a person that is 26 years old and knowing that, hey, if you choose to be a Met beyond 5 years of this contract, it is going to put you into the 800 millions range, is just a laughable show of the times that we're in.
I mean, the other thing is he chose to be a Met over choosing to be a Yankee. It's not like the Yankees weren't in it, right? And the money was, by comparison, just a small amount less. Again, we don't know what other factors of the contract there were, but he chose to be a Met over choosing to be a Yankee. And the Mets have played second fiddle to the Yankee for so long. And now someone actually choosing the Mets over the Yankees, who was on the Yankees and chose to leave the Yankees and go to the Mets, is a real headline as well. Not as big as headline as the money, but still, maybe to Yankee fans, it's as big a headline as the money, because Yankee fans are always used to the Yankees spending money.
I'd imagine for Mets fans, that's probably one of the biggest parts of the headline, to go and have bragging rights over something in that city when it comes to these baseball teams has to be massive this morning, waking up, seeing all of the positive momentum that you've had as of late. Because Steve Cohen had to take a lot of grief in the beginning when he came over and made all these bold proclamations and was the owner that was out there on Twitter chirping at everyone all along the way. And then this season, things really started to pick up and hit their stride. You had the whole oh my God phenomenon here. Francisco Lindor's been awesome for them. You go and, obviously your head of baseball operation and David Stearns has done a great job. Your manager, Carlos Mendoza, it all seems to be trending in the right direction for them. So congratulations, Mets fans. Soak this up. I don't know if there's any worry or feelings that come with the likes of Jets fans on the other side of town that never feel like anything good is actually going to be rewarded with your team. But this does feel like a case where they're building in the right direction and building to potentially sustain in New York on that side of town. So congratulations to those fans there. Dad, we will get to the college football playoff rankings reveal coming up at the next segment, but this was going on during the game you were calling in Sunday Night Football last night. We'd be remiss if we didn't give the hat tip for something that, while the Mets situation feels decidedly abnormal for the history of that franchise, the Kansas City Chiefs winning a game on Sunday Night Football against a division opponent on a walk-off doinked field goal, 19-17, in a game where it felt ripe for the picking the entire time, is so on brand for this year's Chiefs team. I can't imagine. What was the feeling like in the building watching the Terminator ultimately walk down the Los Angeles Chargers?
It's like everybody knew it was coming. Well, first off, it had to become a game because it was 13-0 at halftime. Neither team, and these both teams have, excellent quarterbacks, but neither team could really sustain a whole lot. 13-0. The Chargers' first 5 possessions were punts, and then they had the ball with time running out in the first half. They made a kind of an effort to get in scoring range. They weren't going to. This was the amazing thing with the Chargers. Ladd McConkey didn't play. Ladd McConkey has shoulder and knee issues. He didn't play. He's 32% of Herbert's passing yards. He is basically their offense. J.K. Dobbins, their running back, just went on IR. So they had Dobbins and Gus Edwards in the backfield. They lost him. So now their leading receiver is Will Dissly, the tight end. And right before the half, they run such an inconsequential over the middle pass to Dissly at like the 40-yard line. He's not going to get anywhere near scoring. The clock's going to run out. Mike, he took a hit and missed the second half on a play that never should have happened. That kind of, it was blew my mind at the end of the half that they did it, that they ran the play. He's going off the field holding his shoulder. I'm like, are you kidding me? They never should have run the play, and they lose their tight end. But after the halftime, they only had 3 possessions, touchdown, field goal. They took the lead in this game, 14-13. They took the lead in this game, 17-16. But when they got that field goal to go up 17-16, you knew it was in the air on the sideline and I even said it in the booth. I said, the Chargers need to score a touchdown. They need to be a touchdown better, or they need to have Kansas City go the distance in the end zone. Something they can do, but you need to make them not just go in field goal range. And sure enough, the Chargers could not. They kick a field goal. They go up 17-16. Plenty of time left. And to boot, speaking of booting and kicking, Cameron Dicker then kicks off for Los Angeles, and he squibs a kick that doesn't reach the landing zone. Now you have a quarterback leading a team down 1 point in Patrick Mahomes with the ball starting at the 40-yard line. I mean, everybody knew what was coming. Everybody knew what was coming, especially on the Charger sideline. And it happened. It happened to where they ran out the last 4+ minutes of the game, made the Chargers burn their timeouts, had a chippy field goal. Was interesting. Andy Reid let the clock run down to 1 second instead of like the normal 3 seconds. Let it run down to 1 second. But Mike, everybody knew it was going to happen. It's now, and it's not like it's luck. This is the 10th time this year that the Chiefs have come from behind and won a 1-score game. The 10th time. That's not a freak thing. It's a pattern, and they don't get nervous. They don't get uptight. They just run their game plan, and they have all the confidence in the world that they can get the job done. And normally they do.
It's a team I just don't understand how it keeps happening at this point, Dad, because I was watching that game last night, and they tried out yet another left tackle in DJ Humphries, who ends up getting hurt and going out, but leads the team still when pressure's allowed with 8 on the night in his first action in a Chiefs uniform here, as ultimately then you had to have...
We lost Mike.
Look at him.
We lost Mike.
Oh, he's back.
Oh, there he is. He's back.
He's frozen?
Okay. So, yeah, they lost them for a while lost me for a little bit here. Couldn't protect on the perimeter still. It feels like Mahomes gets hit all the time. I don't know how this team keeps winning. Shout out to the Tay Voodoo. We knew that Travis probably wasn't going to lose on the last night of the Taylor Swift Eras Tour as his baby finishes up in Vancouver on the 2-year world tour for the ages. And so none of it's surprising, Dad. I understand when we get to the playoffs, we know they have all this experience and time under task. But this is a team that struggled to protect against deep passes down the field, struggles to protect their quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, do these fundamental things.
On a Monday, so it was a wild weekend of conference championships in college football. The playoff rankings are set. It's done. It led to a lot of crazy tweets, comments on the air, lots of drama, fellas, and some conversation about what the committee values most. The main thing being a lot of conversation induced by Nick Saban about strength of schedule as Alabama finds themselves on the outside of the college football playoffs. What do you make of all the hullabaloo, fellas?
Yeah, hullabaloo was always what this system was designed to create, so I'm not surprised that we found our way here, especially in year one of the 12-team playoff, where we knew the teams that we were going to be discussing, Dad, would be a lot more flawed than in years past, so we'd have more to sink our teeth into in that regard. The final ranking, for anyone that missed it, has Oregon as the number 1 seed in the tournament, the bye, getting that first-round bye, followed by Georgia as the number 2 seed, Texas moving down as the 5th seed facing Clemson at home. We've got this is the final rankings, not the seeding here. Followed by Penn State as the 4 seed, Notre Dame is the 5, Ohio State is 6, 7. We know this gets jumbled up, Dad, and this is part of the confusion here, is this ends up sorting out a lot differently in the final ranking, as you can see here with the way that it shakes out for the actual bracket itself, with Oregon and Georgia 1 and 2, with Georgia winning the SEC championship, followed by Boise State as the 3 seed and Arizona State as the 4 seed, the 4 highest ranked conference champions moving up in that spot, which, Dad, I think is the one and probably most understandable complaint in my regard coming off this weekend from college football in the final rankings is the natural seeding versus what we've opted for this year, something that really incentivizes conference championship winners by rewarding them with that bye in the first round, as opposed to just saying, hey, the conference championship winners get an automatic bid to the tournament, but we're going to seed this thing normally, which I think would alleviate a lot of the confusion for fans in trying to explain this towards the end of the season, but also create a bracket where there's a little bit more of an advantage for the number one team, as I feel like Oregon and the draw that they got for being the undefeated team in college football, winning their conference's championship, and now supposedly getting to have the inside track on a title with the way that this should be set up, I feel like would do them more of a favor in a way that you should earn by being the number one seed. So I do think that complaint, Dad, about maybe changing the way that we do the seeding was probably the most just one I heard this weekend.
Yeah, basically you have a team that was 10th in the week before having a bye, and a team that was 10th in Boise State and 15th in Arizona State went from 15th to a bye to the 4 seed. So yeah, that part has to change. You can guarantee conference champs a spot in the playoff, but you can't guarantee them the bye. That definitely needs to change. And going into the weekend, we kind of knew what the silver bullet was. It was, okay, Miami's going to get knocked out because of the Iowa State, Arizona State winner was going to definitely knock Miami out, who was sitting at 12. But what would happen at 11 with Alabama? And exactly what needed to happen for the committee happened. SMU lost to Clemson. And I'm sure even for the committee, Mike, it changed. The way that first half went, SMU was going to be out. Alabama was going to be in. SMU makes a great comeback, loses a close game. So the committee keeps them in and knocks Alabama out. That was the biggest story that they saved to the end of the college football show of, was it going to be SMU or was it going to be Alabama? And then let everybody start with the teeth gnashing and the hand wringing on both sides of the equation. But I do think they got it right. I think SMU should be in for the way they finished that game, for the way it's set up now. But there's never going to be a perfect system. There's always tweaks they can make. But the first tweak they should make, I completely agree, is you can't just hand the top 4 conference champs buys, because that just throws things out of whack a bit.
Yeah, I would agree. To your point, when you've got 9 and 12 ultimately occupying spaces in the first round bye space, it does sort of fly in the face of what looks like should happen in a system like this, where I'm with you, Dad. Once SMU did what they did in the ACC championship game, gave us one of the most exciting endings of the weekend against Clemson, who ultimately, yet again, gives Dabo more ammunition to go to the microphone with, finds their way back into the college football playoff field this year. Then it looked like it was going to be decided for all the things that we knew. Ward Manuel, the committee chair, telling everyone going into the weekend, hey, the teams that are sitting at home right now that aren't getting to add another data point aren't going to really have a chance to move up very much. It was pretty well communicated. They left the door open to say, hey, a loss could allow us to drop a team from the conference championship back if we saw it fit. But they had a decision in most people's mind to make. And this is what becomes the crux of the argument, Dad, is if you had gone through it like that and said SMU loses a close game in the conference championship team to Clemson, who, defensively, certainly, talent-wise, certainly one of the best, if not by far the best team they've faced all year, but then drop them out of it, what's the incentive for conference championships going forward? The committee made their decision, and boy, oh boy, the response was swift from everyone in SEC country here, from Greg Byrne, the Alabama athletic director, who took to Twitter, to Nick Saban, the former Alabama head coach who's now been a part of ESPN's college football coverage, who had this to say about the SEC going forward and the way that they're going to view scheduling in light of what seems to be perceived around that conference as a slight to strength of schedule as a metric for picking champions. Take a listen.
If we don't take strength of schedule into consideration, is there any benefit to scheduling really good teams in the future? Like, Here at Alabama, we're supposed to play Notre Dame, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Florida State in the future outside the league. Well, those are great games for fans to see, and that's what I think we should be doing. In college football is creating more good inventory for great games that people are interested in. But do you enhance people wanting to do that? What's the athletic director going to do? He may go cancel all those games now.
So, Dad, I understand the sentiment of, oh man, strength of schedule not nearly as valued here. So why shouldn't we just play easy games all year, play one or two hard ones, which really winds up becoming the Big Ten strategy if the SEC is going to be mad at anybody here. Although Texas certainly falls into that bucket based on how their season went, and they still occupy that fifth seed, the coveted fifth seed in the college football playoff. But Dad, to make this argument, this year, if you are Alabama AD Greg Byrne, if you are the SEC in general trying to point to this, is sort of laughable given the fact that all of the teams in the mix that we talked about here, from Alabama to South Carolina to Ole Miss, lost their games in conference that were ultimately the difference between them being in and them being out. Ole Miss scheduling Wake Forest this year and getting a decided win. Alabama going on the road and beating a Wisconsin team that finished fourth worst in the new bloated Big Ten. Those were not the difference in all of this. It was poetically enough in an age of expansion in college football for these power conferences, and in the SEC, Alabama getting drubbed by 3 touchdowns as a healthy favorite against newcomer Oklahoma, that ultimately cost you this, as the sign of the times that no, it's not your out of conference schedule that did this. It's the fact that you keep pursuing more in terms of more dollars and acquiring more teams over here. So yeah, your conference road's a little bit tougher, and that's what ends up snake biting you here. Not anything that happened out of conference.
Yeah, and that's not going to change. The conference is still going to have tough games because they're out of conference games were Western Kentucky, South Florida, Wisconsin, and Mercer. And Wisconsin, you caught in a down year. They're 5-7. You outscored those teams 199-33. The closest game was 42-16. And that was South Florida. So this is about conference schedule, and that's not going to change. And you lost to 2 conference foes who were unranked in Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. And the Oklahoma loss, listen, you don't get smoked by Oklahoma, you're probably in the playoffs. So, I mean, I don't know what's going to change because it was in conference. Now, Nick Saban saying, do we play the Notre Dames and other Power 4 schools of the world and out of conference? Well, if you only lose to a ranked team, if Alabama only lost to Tennessee was the only one of the 3 losses that was ranked, that's not going to hurt you as bad as getting smoked by a non-ranked Oklahoma team. But this is about conference games. You're in the SEC. Yes, it's a difficult conference. Yes, you guys, end up feeding on each other. That's not going to change. And they're going to lean on the fact that what their strength of schedule was 16th and SMU's was 66 and say that has to have something to do with it. But not when you get blown out by an Oklahoma team. Not when you only score 3 points and have a bad loss like that in conference.
No. Bill Connolly over at ESPN pointed out SP Plus is his metric in measuring the strength of teams around college football. Said Bama's non-conference opponents this year were 67th, 77th, and 80th in SP Plus an FCS team. The 3 SEC teams that did make it to the college football playoff all had at least one top 60 non-conference opponent. So again, if you're going to try and make this a correlation and causation thing, there it is for you there. But instead, you've got Alabama athletic director Greg Byrne pulling this out, which I thought was the most disingenuous part of this, is with this outcome, we need to assess how many P4 non-conference games make sense in the future to put us in the best position to participate in the CFP. That's not good for college football. I have no issue with Greg Byrne as a person. I have all the due respect for him in the job that he does at Alabama, but that's a ridiculous notion that what's good for college football is at the helm of any of this. What's not good for college football is stripping down these other conferences for parts and taking off their best teams in order to conglomerate all of this in 2 areas and continue to drive it towards the Super League in a sport that largely grew up as a a regional thing that people could latch onto. Like, none of this that's gone on is inherently good for the sport in some of the ways that we talk about with that. And so threatening to withhold the SEC from these out-of-conference matchups as if it's some sort of punishment for the rest of us because this conference didn't get what it wanted here, to me is a bit laughable. And it'll subside soon enough, and we'll get back to the games. And this is the politicking that you'd expect. I don't know if they're actually going to do anything, but the committee made it pretty clear, Dad, coming off of this. If you were just looking for the SEC Big Ten Invitational, you're going to have to do that yourselves. And for the people that are complaining about all the most talented teams are in the SEC and all this stuff, you're probably going to get the super conference that you want eventually. You're probably going to get the Super League that you want eventually and get all your hopes and dreams with that. But the committee made it pretty clear here that the games are still going to matter enough to where that's not going to be right now.
So you had 4 Big Ten teams, 3 SEC teams, 2 ACC, 1 Big 12, 1 Group of 5, and 1 independent. That's how it broke down. And you look at the seeding, and it seems and it seems unfair to talk about Arizona State this way, but it seems Texas, because that was the other question. How would Texas, Penn State, and Notre Dame be seeded in the bracket? Who would be 5, 6, and 7? And then when Texas 5, Penn State 6, and Notre Dame 7. So Texas plays Clemson, and if Texas wins, they get Arizona State. And by the way, Kenny Dillingham's led Arizona State team is one of the hottest teams in the country right now. But you look at the 4 teams with a bye, and you say who is considered the weakest is the wrong word, but it's going to be Texas if they win against Arizona State. Then it's Penn State if they beat SMU against Boise State. Some say the path is set for James Franklin to really make a run this year and try and separate himself from the pack after keeping the Big Ten championship game closer than I thought it was going to be, quite honestly, with Oregon. And then Notre Dame takes on Indiana, winner playing Georgia, and Ohio State is home to Tennessee, the winner taking on Oregon.
Yeah, and obviously with Georgia, the big question is going to be the health of their quarterback, Carson Beck, who went out after the first half of that SEC title game. Brock Vandagriff ends up being the quarterback that leads the Dogs back in that game for a win that helps them punch their ticket there. And so, Dad, if you look at it in terms of what you just described, the road to these championships for each of these teams and how it's reflected in the odds, according to DraftKings Sportsbook, the initial odds, Texas actually tied with Oregon at plus 350 for the favorites and most likely to win the college football playoff. So that 5 seed, every bit as valuable as people described it in the lead up to this. Georgia close behind after that, the number 2 seed in the dance at plus 380, followed by then Ohio State at plus 475. But I'm with you, and that's why we talked about some of the natural seeding, Dad, that maybe would even this out in favor of some of those top seeds. But right now, Texas and Oregon, your early favorites. As we look at the first version of this, we will have plenty of time to set the table on everything coming up from this, from the first site home matchups that have some interesting rules around the ticket allocations, what's going to go on in these, how you put on an event of this magnitude, postseason football on these campuses for the first time in the sport's history, which is going to...
Let's take a look at some of the big games in the NFL over the weekend, starting with the performance of the year candidate Josh Allen playing out of his mind. Great performance, didn't get the W. Take a listen for his reasoning for clock management at the end of that Bills loss.
Josh, on the last time you got the ball at the goal line, was that was the call to go with the run because you guys ended up using a timeout there and might have cost you a chance to stop the clock at the end?
Yeah, I got to find a way to get in.
Did you change to that play at the line? Because it looked like you put guy in motion to get behind it there.
No. I try to run the call as best as I can. I got to find a way to get in the end zone.
Blunt and to the point. Guys, did the end of that game frustrate you?
Oh, yeah, I think it frustrated anybody who was watching all of that. 1:06 left in the game for anyone that missed it. The Buffalo Bills have a chance to get it back to within 1 score at the end and ultimately do get in the end zone, Dad. But on 1st and goal at that point, they opt to go for the tush push under center, fall short, and end up having to burn one of their 3 remaining timeouts. And as a result, they burn that timeout. They score, go for the onside that isn't recovered. And then now the Los Angeles Rams on the other side, they're only able to stop the clock twice en route to this Rams win. Now, the Rams ultimately decide to actually make that smart analytics decision that Greg Olson talked about, where instead of going and trying to kick a field goal, or see, they'd done that before, going and trying to kick a field goal to go up 6 and just down 3 end up scoring instead. They do the right thing on that side. So that is a foil, Dad, in those final moments, I think. Sean McVay and the coaching staff being as dialed in as they were on that moment of not incentivizing aggressiveness. And on the other side, the Buffalo Bills mismanaging the clock that horrifically. Sean McDermott and the staff are rightly going to take a lot of grief coming off of this.
Yeah, I mean, you heard Josh Allen say, I'm calling the play that's run. And by the way, out of 19 rushing attempts of 1 or fewer yards this year, they've only missed it 3 times. That was one of them. So they're normally successful, especially when you have a big quarterback like that. And Sean McDermott said, well, if he basically said you're going to lose 15 to 20 seconds if you try and not use the timeout and re-rack another play. When no, what we're talking about is pass the ball. Don't run the ball. Don't have the clock keep running. And I know when you're on the yard line, half yard line, whatever you're on, it seems like you should get an easy run into the end zone. But the worst possible scenario happened, and you have to take that into consideration as a coach and say, okay, what's the worst possible scenario? If you can avoid an onside kick, avoid it at all costs. What has it been? 3 recovered in 41 attempts this year. Yes. It is one of the most automatic. The only thing that was more automatic than the receiving team recovering their own the onside kick was the old extra point that was an automatic until they moved it back and kicker started to miss it. It's about as automatic as can be. So you have to have that into your thought process of, okay, if we go this route, we now have to do an onside kick, as opposed to with a little over a minute or a little under a minute being able to use our 3 timeouts and being able to kick the ball off and use the 3 timeouts and possibly have some time to kick to have a game-winning score. So yeah, it wasn't about setting up another run if you missed that run because it would burn another 15 or 20 seconds. It was about passing the ball and saving that timeout so you didn't have to onside kick.
Yeah, inexcusably bad decision in my mind there from the coaching staff on down and how they handled that situation. And again, I was wrong. On the other side of that, the Rams were able to run 3 plays. They get the clock down to 7 seconds, and then they punt one with unreal hang time. It lands in the end zone, and that's another one. Another gaffe by Buffalo is not having the returner ready to go and at least try, because once the ball came down and hit the ground, the final seconds ticked off the clock and the game was over without Buffalo getting any other chance or opportunity at this. So again, Dad, you've got that on one side of the ball, and on the other side, Sean McVay and this Rams team passing the ultimate test, putting the ball in the hands of their quarterback to go make a play on 4th and 6 that ultimately winds up with them in the end zone instead of going up a meaningless 6 points and incentivizing the Buffalo Bills to go out there and be aggressive. I thought this was exactly the right moves from them on one side, and on the other side, certainly a gaffe that might cost them a lot in a game where, Dad, Josh Allen goes out and makes history, becomes at worst. There are some people that said Otto Graham did it as well back in the 50s, but at worst, the second player in NFL history to score 3 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing touchdowns in one game. Josh Allen accounted for 424 yards on his own in this game, in a guy that's still stating his MVP case, even in a loss, I think, Dad. I don't think this does anything to move Josh Allen back in that conversation if you were one to do that.
No, not at all. I tell you who's going to feel horrible in this one, and the Rams side of the ball a little less, is the defenses. I mean, this is one where, as a defensive player, especially if you're on the Bills team, where you come up on the short end and you gave up 42 points. I mean, there was over 900 yards of total offense in this game, both defenses. And but the Rams, you knew their defense was a little less. Buffalo's, that's one thing you take away from this game. You saw the Rams finally put it together with all their weapons, with Kyren Williams, with Puka Nacua, with Cooper Kupp. Finally get it going. Nacua had 162 yards, 12 catches on 14 targets. I mean, it was kind of back to that high-powered offense that has them just one slot out of the playoffs behind Washington. The Rams are sitting in the 8th slot. And for the Bills, they're now 2 games behind a Kansas City team that they beat. So they would win the tiebreaker, but they're 2 games behind them with, not many games to go.
Yeah, I do think that game was more vintage Stafford, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp than it was necessarily a total failing by Buffalo. But either way, like you said, the results are what they are, and that 1 seed looking like less and less of a likelihood here. Jesse, let's move on to our next bit of sound here. What do we got from the NFC?
Yeah, we got a QB1 who got it done in Jalen Hurts, but the story of the game seemed to be more about what wasn't happening. Here's Jalen Hurts on the passing woes that the Eagles are experiencing.
Yeah, I think they did a good job. I think we did a bad job. That starts with me, how I execute, and ultimately, you yearn and I yearn for better synchronization amongst that. Yearn for a more complementary style of ball in a sense. Some things don't get you until it gets you, and it's been definitely been some urgency there trying to figure it out.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts yearns for a passing game over 200 yards. He's been under it for the last 3 games. Does this need to be addressed, guys? Are we worried about this as we close in on the postseason for the Eagles?
The Eagles receivers certainly felt like addressing it when they were asked after the game. Both Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown had something to say about the lack of synchronicity in the passing game, as Jalen Hurts put it there. And, Dad, it was a struggle. There were throws that to be had out there that Jalen Hurts just flat out missed. Now, this is a game that he affected, I think, in a really positive way with some great runs. Ends up as their second leading rusher with 59 yards on the day. We know this offense has shifted to a running attack behind Saquon Barkley, who yesterday passed LaShawn McCoy for the franchise's all-time leader in single-season rushing yards this year. But if you're those talented receivers, I still think there's some frustration that, A, your volume's gone down. We know how receivers operate, and that's always going to ruffle some feathers. But also now to have in that limited volume as many misses as Jalen Hurts had in a 14 for 21, 108-yard passing day, I can understand some of the frustration from that receiving core.
Yeah, but they won 9 in a row, man. I mean, this isn't the time to be moaning about the play. I mean, you won. Winning is hard, and this is more of a running team. I know in the last 3 games, Jalen Hurts has been under 200 yards passing, but he's throwing touchdowns. He's not turning the ball over. I mean, I don't know what there is to complain about. I mean, you're not folding like you did last year when you had a great start. You're winning games. I know this was against a bad opponent, but again, a win is a win. You take the win and you move on. I mean, it sounded like a funeral in that locker room, a little like, oh my God, the sky is falling. It's like, guys, you know what? We won the game, albeit it wasn't the greatest game in the world, but you put in all that work and you got the W. You've had good passing games before, but you are a more balanced running attack team right now. And oh, by the way, it's working for you. So, I mean, forget the funeral march after a game.
Yeah, but Dad, I do think there's a difference between just being a more decided rushing a team and then not executing well to your standard against, by the way, the Carolina Panthers, who have been better, and Bryce Young continues his renaissance in the back half of the season, was excellent again. Under him and Adam Thielen on money down seem to be an unstoppable combination at this point. The money they invested in the offensive line clearly been worth it. But Dad, you're still supposed to be, along with the Bills, we've talked about teams jockeying for that position of second best in football behind the Detroit Lions. And that effort from the Philadelphia Eagles, the execution that A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, I think, are hinting at, are the thing that fell below the standard for them. So, again, I can understand, hey, we're supposed to win this game. And the fact that we're not doing it in a way that we know is going to win us games at the highest level, I think does prompt some frustration.
The 2-time Super Bowl champs have 10 come from behind victories and 1-score wins. You don't think they would have the thought to be frustrated?
I get it, but they don't have 2 all-pros in the wide receiver room there that are going out there and feeling like they're not getting the ball in the right spots from their quarterback.
They're winning 9 games in a row. They are a rushing attack team that complements with
the Eagles were
10-1
to start last year, and we all looked at them and said, this doesn't feel real.
Well, it's real right now. Last year was last year. I mean, are they gonna fold and go to last year, or are they going to continue to win? They have a much better running game this year than they did last year with the MVP candidate and Saquon Barkley. I don't know what all the complaining's about. I really don't. I mean, you've won 9 games in a row. Take it. enjoy it, move on, fix the things you feel you need to fix. But why bemoan them in the locker room after a win, after your 9th straight win?
Now, to their point, they were asked about it. We were reading these quotes as opposed to hearing the audio, so maybe it's not as damning. All those things could certainly possible. More damning is what we finish off with here, Jesse. Let's go to the revenge game that wasn't for Kirk Cousins against his former team in the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, he returned to Minnesota, had another tough performance among a stretch of tough performances, which prompted his head coach to say this about his quarterback situation.
You know, everything is always discussed when you go watch the tape and do all those type of things. But like Kirk Cousins is our quarterback. We'll have the ability to go watch this tape just like we do every single week. You know, Kirk played significantly better than he did the week before. We got a chance to go out there and focus on us and get a chance to go out there and really work on what we do and what we do well. And we'll do whatever is best to go win football games, and Kirk's definitely a part of that.
I mean, what's been going wrong for Kirk? And we have the Michael Penix shadow behind him, just like it keeps being brought up, and with what people are saying and what they're not saying, you know?
Yeah, it's certainly looming in the distance, Dad, as this team, we know, had an important weekend at the inflection point for them and the Buccaneers in pursuit of this playoff spot from the NFC South. And Kirk Cousins now 8 interceptions during this 4-game losing streak for them. Threw for a ton of yards in this game, Dad, but once again, you saw the first interception coming from under center, looking uncomfortable, the things that we've talked about physically, limiting this player. All of them seem to rear their heads in a game versus an opponent that knew him really well. And so, again, I don't think it's going to happen now, but I won't be surprised if that change happens if this slide continues and the playoffs look less and less likely down the stretch here.
It would be amazing. A veteran quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who's had a lot of obviously regular season success, if he were to get benched for a rookie that hasn't really done anything in the NFL, that would just show you how wrong it's going. You mentioned 8 interceptions. I think it was 8 the last 4 games, no touchdowns, and now they dropped out of first place. Tampa Bay is in first place, even though Atlanta swept Tampa Bay. So, yeah, they have some issues there. The worst thing you can do is turn the ball over and give the other team more possessions, especially a team like Minnesota. Listen, I raised my hand. Was I wrong about Sam Darnold? Now, it was a few games ago where he had some interceptions, but these last, they're on a 6-game winning streak. The last 4 games, 11 touchdowns, no interceptions. I will say, man, I was wrong about, the water finding its level and him becoming what he was. You look back when he had even in the win against Jacksonville, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Before that, in a win, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He has been absolute money with 11 touchdowns and no interceptions in the last 4 games. He has been on fire.
5 touchdowns in this outing here against the Falcons defense that we talked about was going to struggle to get pressure in ways that could probably bother him. But the big field, Marshall Newhouse going to join us as he always does on Monday to look ahead to Monday Night Football coming up in about 20 minutes here. But an exciting moment for us as we head out to South Bend and welcome in Notre Dame star quarterback Riley Leonard as they get set to now host a home playoff game in the first round in this new era of the 12-team playoff. So good morning, Riley. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's good to see y'all again.
Good to see you again, man. We appreciate the time this morning. And you guys knew after the USC win, going to be in the field, more than likely going to be hosting a game. But we saw the footage yesterday from inside the football complex with you all together. Take us inside there. What was the feeling like amongst you and your teammates when the announcement finally came through that you'd be playing and hosting Indiana in the first round?
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, everybody on our team thinks that, they can predict the future. So I had about 50 different possibilities that were pitched to me before the announcement. And then we sit in there and then you hear, the sports people talk about it for another 15 minutes. I'm like, dude, just tell us who we got. We're ready to go. But when we found out it was Indiana, what more can you ask for? Everybody was talking about, all right, it's a football state now. And we're ready to roll. I think the ticket prices are going for like $1,200 minimum. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's this first year of teams hosting playoffs is just such a special year. And so it seems like forever ago, that second game of the season when you guys lost to Northern Illinois. But how was that used by your coach, Marcus Freeman, each week after to keep you guys focused?
Yeah, we've kind of said it a lot, but I mean, when I tell you he brings it up before every game just to, kind of piss us off a little bit, he does. Like, It's crazy. Every single game, he always tells us to keep the pain and reminds me of that game and the rest of the team, and we just use that as fuel to the fire. I mean, shoot, that's like 90 plus days ago at this point, and we're still using it as motivation. So I think it's pretty cool that nobody's shying away from the fact, that we lost that game. I mean, we taken it with open arms. I remember after that game, we met on Sunday, and he told me, one day you're gonna be thankful for this, and I sat there, I was like, bro, I'm never gonna be thankful for this. This was terrible. And in hindsight now, maybe he's right. But yeah, it's been a long time coming since then.
The season has been a journey, there's no doubt. And for you personally, you come over here, you didn't get to participate much in the spring because of injury, and you come out here in the fall. And we mentioned the offense gets off to a slow start leading up into through that game. Now, the way you guys have been rolling here, when did things start to click for you? When did you start to feel truly comfortable at the helm of this offense as the quarterback?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, that process obviously it takes time. I think whenever I gain my confidence is really when the coaches brought to my attention how much they've really believed in me. I'm a guy who kind of probably needs that a little bit, and whenever me and Denbrock started meeting on a regular basis, I kind of understood him and he understood me a little more, and the plays that I like. They started coming to me, hey, what'd you guys run at Duke, and what did you used to like, and what do you like, what do you not like, and really started to take my input into consideration when talking about the game plan. So I just kind of gained confidence in that, and I always say this, but like I've had more practices in this offense post NIU than I had before, including fall camp, spring ball, or any years in the past, obviously. So every week it's just like more and more reps helps a lot.
So, you listen, you're the quarterback, you get the lion's share of the interviews and the talk. The Jeremiah Love, the running back, has done a ton running the ball. But boy, it really starts with the guys up front. I'm gonna give you a chance to talk about those guys in a group of five, that old lineman that started as such an inexperienced line that dealt with injuries before the season, even dealt with injuries during the season, to what they have molded into.
Yeah, these guys up front here, I mean, it is something special. They move like a little mini like military base. They have like a military based culture, and that kind of probably doesn't make any sense to anybody. But if one guy's watching film, everybody's in there watching film. Nobody's on their phones. It is straight business, and these guys are yelling at each other in practice. You got backups, yelling at starters in practice, to get right, and vice versa. These dudes, it's just incredible. I mean, even on the weekends, if you see one of them, you're gonna see 15 of them. Like that's just what they do. Everywhere they go as a unit. And they just have such a great culture, man. They're hard headed, but man, did they block their tails off.
Certainly, that group has been special, and that standard has existed in that room for quite some time here. Dad mentioned your running back. Jeremiah Love has produced some eye-popping plays in here. What impresses you most about his game that's taken him to being one of the best in the country as a sophomore?
Yeah, I mean, this is a kid who doesn't say too much, right? I mean, you go to practice, and he just does what he does, and like he'll just do the most random things. We'll just be standing there in practice, watching the twos go, and he'll just hit a backflip just because that's just what he does, and you see that in the game, and you're like, dude, what? Where did that? It's just natural for him. It's hard to explain, but he's a really hard worker, and everybody on the team really loves and respects him. I mean, he's got a great future ahead of him.
So again, after NIU, you guys go on a tear, haven't lost. You only had one score game. That was against Louisville, where you won by a touchdown, 31-24. But when, after that NIU loss, how many games did it take to where you guys felt, yeah, this is our team. This is what we are?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it took probably a little bit of time. Obviously, we come out after NIU, and shoot, I was so nervous after that game playing Purdue, because I was like, bro, if I don't play good this game, like, oh gosh. We ended up really, going out with a hot start there, and kind of dominating against them. But I think it took some time for us to play probably Louisville, a good opponent against Louisville, to really understand, the potential that we have. And we left a lot out on the field against Louisville too. But just to play them and win that game was a good confidence boost.
Big picture here, Riley. You came over here as a guy already very accomplished in college football from your time at Duke and what you and Coach Elko had done down there. You come to South Bend and go through all the things that you just mentioned here. What's your impression been twofold of Marcus Freeman and the job that he's done at the helm leading this program, but also being in South Bend and seeing what this program is all about in the landscape of college football?
Yeah, two good questions. So I'll start with Coach Freeman. I mean, this is a dude that knows every single person's name in the facility and like truly cares about everybody. I'm talking about the janitors' names. He's gonna treat everybody, you know, like they're the starting quarterback. There's a verse from the Bible that I heard, but treat me as you treat the least of us. Talking about how you treat Jesus, and I think that Coach Freeman really treats everybody with so much respect, and he knows them on a personal level, and that culture just stems from the top down. I think our captains have done a great job of really respecting everybody because of that, because we see it every day in Coach Freeman. And then, oh, another Coach Freeman story. I remember I was being recruited and I wasn't even committed at this point, but I sent him a 2-hour podcast with Tom Brady, and 3 hours later he said, "I just watched the whole thing. Call me when you can so we can talk about it." I wasn't even committed at this point. So, it was that's just the type of person he is. And then to come to Notre Dame, like if you drive 2 hours in any direction from here, you're going to see a Notre Dame flag on their front porch. And that's something that, I'm not exactly used to, right? Being at Duke, you got UNC 10 minutes down the road, NC State 20 minutes down the road. Here it's just straight Notre Dame football in any direction. And I just love that. I mean, we go to Chicago, shoot, you're going to see a bunch of Notre Dame fans there. We went to New York City and we're getting stopped. So yeah, it's a special place.
So along with that, we're in a portal era, right? And as far as developing quarterbacks, that happens at some points, but at some, they're like Sam Hartman comes in last year for a year. You're at Notre Dame for 1 year as the quarterback. So you kind of jump into the Notre Dame situation for a year. What's the best advice you got about being a Notre Dame quarterback?
Yeah. Well, everybody talks about like being a transfer into Notre Dame, and I know everybody likes the kid that was here from freshman year, right? But I mean, I tell people like I would have been here this whole time if they offered me or if they even reached out to me, like I'd have been here on the spot if somebody reached out to me if I was a high school kid. But the best advice that I got from here is just like probably living with no regrets. Obviously. And living with no regrets, and then knowing who you play for. Whenever you realize like who you play for, and I remind myself all the time, obviously number one, Jesus Christ, but two, the people in this locker room, that really dials it down. It's like, oh, I'm playing for these guys who I love and care about so much, and they respect me so much as a person. It doesn't even matter, my performance really on the field. It takes a lot of stress off of you. So that's kind of probably the best advice that I've gotten. Yeah, and to live with no regrets, let it fly, because at the end of the day, you're only here for a year. So, your time's gonna pass anyway.
And you've done just that, and now it's landed you in a playoff seat here with a great opportunity. I know it's early in the process, Riley. What do you know about this Indiana team down the road that you mentioned in this football state that you guys are getting ready to face?
Yeah, really good team. I think they're really well coached and know what to do and when to do it. They're starting to understand how to do things and the why. It seems to be on film. They're really mixing up coverages in the back end. They run their main stuff, but they get to it in a lot of different ways, which can be tricky at times. So I don't want to get into it too much, but they're really well coached and obviously a disciplined football team.
Yeah, I know your head coach said yesterday he did Google Kurt Cignetti at Kurt's request, and the results are very positive. An outstanding coach and an outstanding coaching matchup here for these two, and a great situation for you guys, Riley, not being in a conference. You guys got to sit by and sort of have a mini bye this past weekend while everyone else was playing here. And I know you have some folks at Icy Hot that help you go and get right during the bye week. So why don't you tell us about how you prepared here?
Yeah, I think this past week was extremely important for us. Everybody says we don't have a bye. Well, we just had it last week, not playing in a conference championship. So, I mean, there are a lot of different recovery methods that I use, but I feel like Icy Hot has helped me out a lot. I personally use their lidocaine pain relief patch. So you pretty much you just put it on, and they have cooling ones that'll help cool you down. So I put them on both my elbows, and they stay in place, and I pretty much just wear them throughout the day because I take a lot of hits. So my elbows were like busted up last week, but now, like after 1 or 2 days of wearing them, they help me out a lot. So that's just probably the most effective way that I found to recover after a game. But there are a lot of different ways.
Yeah, ways for
Certainly,
athletes like yourself to recover and weekend warriors to recover with Icy Hot as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've seen the physical style that you play, no doubt about it there. So that's certainly big and helpful there. Riley, we talked a lot about football today. I wanted to give you, we have about a minute left here. I know your grandfather has a foundation that you're very proud of in the Buy a Brick Foundation that's helping out folks in Zimbabwe. What can you tell people about the work that he's been doing over there and why that's so important?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Obviously, you can talk about this for hours, but pretty much around 20 plus years ago, he went over to Zimbabwe, Africa, and started building schools. So he's built over 40 school blocks at this point, multiple community gardens, and he's big on, teach a man to fish instead of giving a man a fish. So a lot of the stuff that he does over there is teaching them how to build sustainable communities, right? And he's done a great job of that. I mean, he takes, I don't know, probably, rough estimate, 80% of his income, and he just pours it all into Zimbabwe, Africa. And that's pretty much his life. He goes over there for 6 months out of every year. And I think the only thing keeping him in the States is me playing football. So whenever I'm done with that, hopefully a long time, I think he'll move over there full time. And he grinds his tail off, man. Feeding, they got up to about 20,000 kids a day at one point, but with the drought, in Africa, right, or in Zimbabwe right now, it's kind of hard to do that. So they're trying to build wells as well. So they're doing a lot of good work over there, and I'm very proud of him.
Yeah,
wow,
and I'm sure
awesome.
he is very proud of you, Riley, as are we. So can't thank you enough for helping spread that message. And, for the job that you've done this year, man, it's been a ton of fun to watch. You guys have had a heck of a season, and one that gets to continue now as you get set to host a home playoff game. Congrats stopping by in the last segment and getting us caught up on everything going around in South Bend there. We get large excellence on the set, though, now. Marshall Newhouse, kind enough to join us here. This will be a part of the pregame power-up tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern on the DraftKings Network. If you're having trouble seeing him, that's the outfit. That's not you, no worries, as Marshall's gone full camo this morning here. How we doing, big fella?
I'm doing good. Just trying to dip and duck and dive and dodge.
There we go. Always important to remember the 5 Ds on a Monday coming off the kind of NFL weekend that we had here. So, Marshall, as usual, before we get to Monday Night Football coming up here, I want to take a look back at what we saw over the course of this weekend. And what we saw was a couple of the top teams in the league really struggle. One in the Buffalo Bills that ultimately takes a loss to the Los Angeles Rams off some poor clock management. The other, a Philadelphia Eagles team that gets a win against the Carolina Panthers, but has their wide receivers openly talking about the passing attack here. Which one worried you more for one of the top contenders in the NFL coming off this weekend with what you saw on the field?
I think, I kind of felt like Buffalo was going to have a little bit of a letdown, a really exciting game. They won at home in the snow. You got to travel across country to LA. And the Rams, a healthy Rams team, and nobody wants to see. And so losing by 2 in that fashion, a shootout, we'll have questions about the way their defense played, but I'm less worried about that. But the Eagles, to me, are a team with the talent on that roster. The ceiling is sky high, but I equate it to they're only as good as the trampoline that is Jalen Hurts. Because sometimes he can reach that top. Sometimes he gets the ball where it needs to be, and sometimes they look really stunted with him, even with all the talent around them, with Saquon in the backfield, and as you alluded to, A.J. Brown seeming not so happy with getting the ball and the way he's getting the ball.
I worry more, maybe this is the old defensive player in me, especially when you get to colder weather and playoffs. I think a good defense in a running game, you were an offensive guy, can carry you more. And, the Eagles have the running game and the Bills defense. Now, they can score with offenses, but Boy, when your defense falters that way, when the weather gets a little colder, when you get into the playoffs, to me, that maybe again, that's just a defender in me. I get a little more worry with that.
No, I totally understand that. And the Bills got a hobbled San Francisco team, and they've been playing. They've been playing kind of a shell. They've been playing daring teams to run the ball. And so, what the Rams have no problem doing is inserting Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams in their scheme and running up down the throats and then throwing play action off of that. So I agree with you. I understand that for sure. I think Philadelphia, for a team that we have lauded as being kind of head and shoulders in this upper tier, to not handle Carolina the way I think they probably should have. Shout out to Bryce Young, though. Can we talk about that at some point, about how he's looking and coming along? But you expected them to kind of handle that Carolina team a little more in that situation. Xavier Legette holds on to that ball. We might be talking about them having a loss right now. So I get what you're saying, though.
That's a great point. And for that guy who bet over $3 million on the Eagles, boy, he had to have a gulp moment when Legette thought he had that ball. So a quick aside, I know they're not a team we'll be talking about the playoffs. And for Carolina, how important it would be if they were to continue with Bryce Young and could use a high pick on another part of the team. Do you think Bryce Young has solidified his spot and Carolina will not go with a high pick quarterback?
Yeah, you want to talk about a flip of all flops. He was benched. Andy Dalton was starting. They were figuring out how we can trade Bryce Young for parts. And then Andy gets in an unfortunate incident. Bryce gets a starting job back, and he looks more like the Alabama quarterback that I think we all thought he could be. A lot of stuff to grow into, but it's the confidence in the pocket of making throws that aren't there yet. Anticipatory throws, arm strength, mobility, just like those intangible leadership things as a quarterback where he's walking around with a swagger, like this is his deal. And I think he has convinced Carolina that this is a guy that is ascending and is getting better every week, that we can rely on growing and we can build around. So I absolutely think that he has won them over, and they've got to go be aggressive now. Surround him with weapons, continue to develop him, and man, he looks really sharp in spite of losses. It is ultimately the best tank job that there is because they're competitive. Yeah. He's showing growth, but they're still finding a way, quote unquote, to lose these games and stay in the best draft position.
Yeah, if you can just keep David Tepper from freaking out behind the scenes right now, things actually seem to be trending in that direction. You mentioned Bryce Young. His response under pressure especially, I think, has been great. And in this game, he was pressured on 36% of his dropbacks, but in that 5 of 10 for 92 yards, a better passer rating under pressure than he did without pressure in this game, averaged 9.2 yards per attempt on that. So looked really good. Him and Adam Thielen and that connection have paid dividends for this team as he's come back and made great strides. I'm with you there. Marshall, the other thing we have to talk about is the elephant in the room, though. I know it's worn into the ground at this point, the Jesse Pinkman, they can't keep getting away with this meme. But seriously, how long do you think this Kansas City Chiefs team can continue to fly this close to danger and come out on the other side unscathed?
I mean, it's infuriating if you're any other fan base. The Chargers had played an exceptional game up to that point. You'd like to see Justin Herbert kind of extend the lead and be up by 2 scores and not allow them to make that last drive. But what Kansas City does, and I don't even know if it's dragging people in the muck, but they play just head and shoulders above whoever it is. And they managed to do that because of Patrick Mahomes' creativity. Their defense is timely. And now they've got Isaiah Pacheco back, so they've got a level of physicality in their run game. We've talked about the interior 3 of their offensive line and how they can kind of dominate people. But, it's not even playing down or playing up to an opponent, but they are just comfortable knowing that if we're close, we got the guy. And Pat, at this level, we've seen him do all the magic in the backfield. He doesn't scramble just to scramble. He scrambles with intent. The Chargers brought a simulated pressure there at that last drive, and he was moving around the pocket as just Neo in the Matrix, and you just don't know what to do. And so everyone who knows ball is like, eventually someone's going to not let them be in this position to do this. But here we are, and they've played some good teams, and we just haven't seen that yet. And so I think they're just playing with, I think they want a higher ceiling for themselves. Their tackle position, he's getting hit a lot. That's not sustainable. But man, what do you need but with Pat Mahomes in the ball tied or down the score? Like that's all they're looking for, because they're just gonna, like, we got the stones, we have that fortitude, we've done this enough, and that's all we need. But yeah, I don't know how to explain it other than they just have confidence that they know who they are.
Hey Voodoo is how you explain it. The final night of the Eras Tour, they were not going to lose, and the Taylor Swift effect continues to drive this team. But Dad, I'm with Marshall on this. The thing that scares me the most, it feels like Mahomes is getting hit every other play. The quarterback pressure stats for them don't seem to jive with exactly what we're seeing on the field, but he can't keep getting hit that much. That's the thing that's ultimately going to damn this team.
No, DJ Humphries comes in and he gets hurt toward the end, and that was. And he is coming off an ACL from last year, just signed at the end of last month. So have to keep an eye on that. But the worst part about it is when we say everybody knows they're going to come back, the worst part is the opponent knows. And calling that game last night, when the Chargers didn't get in the end zone and kicked the field goal and went up 2, even their sideline and their fans had to know Pat Mahomes has too much time. All they need is a field goal. Then our kicker squibs it, doesn't reach the landing zone. We get it on the 40-yard line. Everything just worked against the Chargers on this one. So Kansas City is where they are, where they normally are. In the NFC, Marshall, we keep talking about Philly and obviously Detroit. Is Minnesota getting enough love, winning 6 straight, and Sam Darnold playing lights out?
I don't think they are getting enough love, but I think, the reservation is just, what type of Sam are we going to continue to see? Because he's playing exceptional football. They're playing complementary football. Kevin O'Connell's getting the best out of him. But we have seen moments where we're like, okay, a team gets pressure in Sam's lap. How's he going to respond? And he has had a game with 2 picks in the most untimely ways. Last week was not that game. Atlanta is faltering a little bit. Minnesota took care of business with the 5 touchdowns. And so if you can write in stone, which we know we can't do, a neutral to just above neutral Sam Darnold game, Minnesota can absolutely win the NFC. And so everyone's just kind of sitting there thinking, all right, we know what this guy can do, but do we think he can deliver when the games get really, really close, both in that division, in the playoffs moving forward? And I think that's where the smallest amount of hesitation is from people.
Yeah, I can completely understand that hesitation, but the results do speak for themselves. And to Dad's point, Sam Darnold coming off of one of his best games in this run with 5 touchdowns against the quarterback that used to call that city and that team home. Let's look ahead to Monday Night Football coming up tonight, Marshall, a game that on paper before the season looked like it was going to be for a lot more than we're currently sitting now with the Bengals at the Dallas Cowboys. But Marshall, one of the things we've seen, especially since Dak Prescott went down, is a considerable amount of fight from a banged up Dallas Cowboys roster that we know doesn't have its star quarterback, doesn't have its star lineman and Zach Martin anymore for the rest of the season here. Do you think this effort is going to be enough to potentially save Mike McCarthy's job at this point?
I don't know if they even need tonight. I mean, obviously, if it's abysmal, maybe we're having a different conversation. But it sounds like Mike McCarthy is staying. Again, we know Jerry, despite all of the things that he says and the attention that he brings, doesn't make rash coaching decisions. And has spoken in glowing terms, relative glowing terms of Mike McCarthy. Micah Parsons has now come out in support of bringing back Mike McCarthy. So I don't know if this is the game or the situation where his job is on the line, but they absolutely need to kind of show and save face. Just even with Cooper Rush being your quarterback and things not having gone ideally, you're still defenses in the dumpster with points per game. You're just letting teams run up and down the field on you, and Joe Burrow is not going to be the one that stops doing that. And so what can Cooper Rush and this offense do to keep up? They have shown a lot of resilience. This offensive line has figured things out, relatively just with all the injuries. And Rico Dowdle, where is he? Where has this guy been? He's showing out as well. And so, yeah, they've got a little bit of a pride moment here where we got to see this team and how Mike McCarthy is leading them translate to the effort on the field, because, yeah, we're looking towards next season and seeing what we can build.
So little over a minute left. Both teams out of the playoff run, and we've all played long enough to where we've had good seasons and seasons where we're out of it. Talk about the mindset of the individual player when you are basically not playing for a playoff spot and you're just playing out the string of the season.
Yeah, I mean, to a man, your tape travels. There's pride in the locker room. Every time you tape up and you dress out, there's certain guys who are hitting free agency who are trying to get paid, and it might not be in the place they're at. Certain guys are trying to make a roster both this year and the following year, whether it's in Cincinnati, Dallas, or elsewhere. And then, yeah, you're showing out on the Simpsons simulcast. I mean, you got to show out for that. You can't be dragging your butt around when Mina and Dan are making Simpsons references and looking yellow. So I think the mindset is a prideful thing. This is my occupation. I have pride in what I do. I want to show out. I want to continue to compete. As retired guys, you have less of this than I do, but you get the itch of like, man, I wish I could go and see the adrenaline spike in the competition once again. So don't take these moments for granted.
And
Marshall,
the one less than
thing
30 seconds here. What's your pick for the night? Bengals -5.5 against Dallas here. Who do you got?
I think I'll take Bengals. Their line is not looking great. This pass rush can get after them, but Joe Burrow, man, he's playing at an elite level despite their record. It's just the weirdest thing to see. I'll take the Bengals.
Yep, no, understand that completely. All the firepower on that offense. He leads the NFL damn near in passing. Jamar Chase leads the wide receivers in the NFL in yards. It's been an exemplary offensive season undermined by those defensive woes. Check him out tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network for the pregame power-up. Trey Wingo, Claudia Bellafato, Emerson Lazia and company. Getting ready. I forgot it was the Simpsons game here, so we'll get hyped for that tonight, and we'll all enjoy it together here. Marshall.
Mike Golic Sr. here with you. Wild weekend in both NFL and college football. We saw some teams with their backs against the wall come out and show some true grit. So let's talk NFL, guys. With the playoffs hanging in the balance here, every game takes on new importance. So who in the NFC took the steps, in your opinion, to be a wild card selection? Did anybody separate themselves from the pack here?
Well, I think certainly, Dad, the NFC wildcard picture especially has been one that's been coming into focus more and more in recent weeks. As it stands right now, you've got the Minnesota Vikings in that lead position, followed by then the Green Bay Packers, the Washington Commanders, that spot. And, Dad, I think that's what it's going to end up being right now. I think there's such considerable distance between most of these teams. You mentioned the Atlanta Falcons obviously have been going toe-to-toe in that division with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This weekend was huge for that swing in a series where the Falcons have a 2-0 sweep over them in the regular season. And the Rams are only a game back right now after an unexpected win in most people's estimation against the Buffalo Bills. I don't know if I trust the Rams still enough based off what we've seen this season, Dad, to say that we're going to get that kind of offensive performance as consistently as we thought we would. That was vintage. Stafford on his best day can put the ball in places that only a handful of quarterbacks can, and two of the best receivers in the NFL who have struggled with health during this season showed up in a big way. And so I would look at this and say, if I had to bet right now that what the wild card would look like, it would be the three teams that we have in it now ultimately representing when it's all said and done.
I may put the Rams in as a division winner over Seattle. Now, Seattle had a nice win over Arizona. Arizona is dropping. They've lost 3 straight. Kyler Murray's thrown 3 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in the 3 losses. They have turned away. Seattle, they're 1 win ahead of the Rams. The Rams have beaten Seattle this year, and they play the last week of the season. So if they stay within 1 game and then beat Seattle, have a same record, and then they will have swept Seattle, they will win the division. And I think I may be with you that I don't think you're going to get a wild card out of the NFC West. So those two will be battling for the division, and that's it. And those other wild card spots will be the spots that you talked about, though there's an outside chance of a wild card of the NFC. But that's still a really good race, I think, for the division title. Seattle and the Rams. Obviously, Tampa Bay and Atlanta is going to be a battle because Atlanta swept Tampa Bay, though Atlanta is really on a bad string right now.
Yeah, it's certainly the case, Dad. The biggest case you can make an argument for the Rams would be the schedule versus what Seattle's getting ready to face right now. We talked about this with the Seahawks relative to the Cardinals. but they have to go play the NFC North now. And I mean, that includes Green Bay and Minnesota in the next couple of weeks. While on the other side of this, the Rams really are playing the division. They play a 49ers team that showed this weekend against the Chicago Bears, right? Hey, we might not be our usual standard, but there's still levels to this. That was a absolute drubbing at the hands of the 49ers, where George Kittle alone went out there and proved he could probably wrestle a bear and win in real life, and certainly could do it on a football field. But then after that, you get the Jets, who are struggling right now, lost to the Dolphins this weekend, a Cardinals team that does seem to be a little bit lost down the stretch before you had that matchup. So the Rams do have the better path to that final matchup of the season between those two for the division here. I just think the Seahawks have been playing really good football right now. Zach Charbonnet in this running game continuing to find life, even with Kenneth Walker out. We know what Geno Smith and that wide receiver core are capable of on their best day. I mean, they're at a point now, Dad, where it's 2 wide receiver ones on that team, similar to what Philadelphia's got with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, and the way that we talk about them, the way that we talk for years about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in the Bengals receiver room. That's Jackson Smith and Jigba and DK Metcalf now in that Seahawks wide receiver room. JSN is second to no one in terms of the production and impact on that team. Mike McDonald's defense has gotten better and better as the season's gone along. And so I think this has turned into a team where, listen, hand up, I was wrong going into the weekend assessing them relative to the Cardinals. And Geno Smith continues to hold the pen for the comeback and the letters that nobody wrote back on.
Yeah, he does. And again, I think this is a battle for one spot, just like the NFC South is a battle for one spot. So that really puts so much more importance where, okay, if we don't win the game, we can fall into a wild card spot. I think this is all or nothing in those two divisions.
Yeah, certainly going for broke right now. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it didn't look great. They got a win over the Las Vegas Raiders. Aiden O'Connell gets knocked out of that game. And so Desmond Ridder now comes in as the third string quarterback, which, as someone pointed out on Twitter, as capable of a third string quarterback situation as you're probably going to find in the NFL, a guy in Desmond Ridder that started extensively in this league, but still just such a sign of the time for this season. The only real highlight of that game ends up coming from the tight end in Brock Bowers, who passes Sam Laporta and breaks that rookie record for receptions by a rookie tight end and continues to do an incredible job there. But Tampa Bay, Dad, they may have taken the lead here, and certainly Atlanta's got the issues we talked about with Kirk Cousins, but that was by no means a dominant performance from the Buccaneers against a wounded opponent in Las Vegas.
No, and that's what we've been talking about with the NFC South. It's almost like somebody has to win. Atlanta had control of it. They were leading the division and had swept Tampa, but they are in an absolute tailspin with their quarterback and Cousins turning the ball over the way he is. It's again a race for one slot. You mentioned Vegas, Lou. Who's the worst team? Is it Vegas or is it the Giants? Quickly on Brock Bowers. Setting records now. He has a chance to break the rookie yardage record held by Mike Ditka, which would be an incredible feat by a rookie tight end. But the Raiders with 2 wins, the Giants with 2 wins. Which team is worse?
Ooh. Man, we're shuffling deck chairs on a really bad one. I mean, I guess the Titanic itself was bad. It literally sank. So there's a reason this metaphor exists. But yeah, I would probably say right now it would be the Las Vegas Raiders. But man, it's by a nose. Both of these teams right now, according to Tankathon, the Las Vegas Raiders currently sitting in that one spot as they both are 2-11 right now. The Vegas Raiders on a 9-game losing streak here. The New York Giants on an 8-game losing streak. So they're putting some distance. New England sitting there at the 3 spot. Carolina both seem to have the arrow, especially at quarterback, at least pointed in such a positive direction. It hardly feels like they're going to catch them. But, Dad, it does seem like the Las Vegas Raiders could be working their way into that number 1 spot. And as we've talked about with Jason Fitz, would be huge for them in a quarterback draft where they seem to be enamored with one quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, and to not have to give up assets for a quarterback that does feel like, relative to recent years, a bit of a reach at number 1 would be huge for that team going forward.
Yeah. It seems like that's fait accompli. If the Raiders had the number 1 pick, it would be Shedeur, with Cam Ward probably being the second quarterback.
Who do you think is
going
worst?
off the board? I think the Raiders are. The Raiders of both teams have the best player on both teams, and that's Max Crosby. He's the best player from both teams for sure. But I think the Giants, while they're going to have a new quarterback, I can't even say they're. Even the quarterbacks the Raiders have, they're losing them. Minshew gets hurt. Aiden O'Connell gets nicked up. I mean, my God.
Well, it's amazing how similar the formula to get to this moment was for both teams, where you've tried to invest capital into offensive lines that still ultimately haven't paid the dividends for you. You watched an incredible running back walk out the door as one of the high-priced free agents of the offseason, who's now enjoying tremendous success elsewhere in Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. The quarterback situations, like you mentioned, you're both on backups down the roster. You've seen 3 quarterbacks hit the field. You've got one offensive player to sell in Malik Neighbors on one side and Brock Bowers, who are both rookies. And defensively, you're led by a Clemson interior defensive tackle and a great edge rusher, Brian Burns in the Giants case and Max Crosby in the Las Vegas Raiders case. They really are mirrors of one another in each conference, vying for this number 1 pick.
And the one other thing they're mirrored at is, we just talked with Marshall about Cowboys and Cincinnati, both teams being out of the playoff run. How do the players react? And he's right. Tape does travel. You're concerned about what and how you look to the team you're on and other teams, that every player is on the team is in a different position. How do you prepare for these games? And the other similarity is are these going to be new coaches? Are the players buying into what these coaches are still selling, when they know, A, the player themselves might not be on that team, B, if they are, it may be for a different head coach. So there's a lot of looking around in locker rooms.
Big Spider-Man pointing meme energy in the worst possible way for the New York Giants and the loss the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at GoJo and Golic, where you can ring the bell. Make sure you're ready to go as soon as we get going, 8 a.m. every morning. But if you miss us live or any of our great guests, thank you, as always, to Marshall Newhouse, who joins us to help preview Monday Night Football, and Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard as they get set to host Indiana at home in the first round of the new expanded college football playoff. If you missed that, check it out wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Guys, let's start off with this. We've talked a lot about football, college football, baseball, and the Juan Soto contract today. A big milestone in the NBA last night, though, for Chris Paul. He passes Jason Kidd for second all-time in assists in NBA history. 12,099 assists now for Chris Paul all-time, trailing only John Stockton, who's so far ahead. We won't have to worry about that. But, Dad, Chris Paul, an interesting point in his journey now as he gets ready to help foster Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs roster, but a reminder of just what he's accomplished for so long in this league.
Yeah, you mentioned Stockton. He's 3,707 away from John Stockton. That's how much John Stockton is going to be number 1 for a while here, because Chris Paul's 39 years old, certainly is not going to get that many. But you're right. He is in that role of bringing along Wembanyama, and San Antonio is sitting at 500, 12-12. So he's doing a nice job with Victor, but certainly deserves credit for the career he's had.
Yeah, well, Chris Paul will be as well known for insurance commercials and hitting people in the no-no places. Certainly what he's done as a distributor, as the architect of a Lob City team that was one of the most notable in recent memory here. There is plenty that goes into the complicated package of Chris Paul, but being up on this list, also just seeing this list in the top 5 and seeing LeBron James sitting at 4, a hilarious reminder of that player and also everything that he's accomplished in the league. So I know LeBron gets plenty of his flowers, and this is about Chris Paul, but good Lord, it's just insane to sit here and continue to comprehend. Speaking of insane, Jesse, let's get to that. I have no explanation for this whatsoever.
Yeah, Jason Kelce is the gift that keeps on giving, okay? He was spotted driving through the streets of Philadelphia in a Philadelphia Eagles golf cart in full Mummers gear. I mean, just incredible to see. As you see in the video towards the end, it looks like he's driving by a camera crew. So I'm guessing that, you know, this is for some kind of a project we're going to see, maybe for his late night show or something. But can you imagine just seeing that driving on the streets of Philly? Like,
you know,
wow.
With Jason Kelce, I can. I mean, nothing is out of the realm for this guy. He is basically just a guy's guy, basically willing to do just about anything. As his first year really diving into the media. Obviously, he breaks a game down well as a former O-lineman. Most O-linemen do such a great job breaking the game down, but he's not afraid to, God forbid, have some fun. But talk about the gift that keeps on giving. The family, his wife, Kylie, She has a podcast, Not Gonna Lie, which was #1 in the country. Listen, and I love her. I mean, she is just she's gonna cuss on this. She's gonna tell it like it is. I mean, she is something else. She is definitely the better half of that too. And now she has a microphone.
Yeah, dethroned Joe Rogan for #1 on the Spotify charts in terms of podcasting, which is an insane sentence to utter, but someone everyone's been excited to hear from there. I'm sure she'll have something to say about what happened at the end of this as Jason flipped the golf cart when it was all said and done. At the very least, Dad, the golf cart itself was wearing a helmet, so I cannot think of a safer circumstance in which to flip a golf cart.
And the other thing is, I'm sure it wasn't his golf cart, unlike the golf cart you wrecked of mine at Notre Dame, which did cause damage, and I did have to pay to repair. I'm sure if anything was damaged, Jason didn't have to pay for the repairs like I did.
No, it's probably not. And this golf cart looked like it was maybe a little more towards the end of its run here. This looked like one you might see at a Muni course or something like that versus yours, which is pretty nice. And I do owe you for that one, and I'll continue to pay you back in love and kindness of being the best son that I can be from here on out, because that's all I know how to do, Dad. And I know that means more to you than money ever could. I could reach into my wallet or my bank account, and I could take out and give you some money here. But ultimately, what's that going to do for you as much as the cost of living right and showing and putting to work so many of these fatherly examples that you've set forward for me?
It was $8,500. I'll take a check, Venmo, however you want to get it to me is fine.
Wow.
So I'll take the money.
How'd you do that,
Yeah.
GoJo?
You know, it's a long story with some details that we don't need to get into right now, but essentially having to drive. No, it has nothing to do with when I was arrested. That was minor intoxication. It was a .03 at a party when I was 18. Who among us has not been in that spot? You guys just didn't have to deal with the Indiana State Excise Police haters.
Let's just say if the local law enforcement was around when you were in the golf cart, there may have been an arrest.
Yeah.
Allegedly, I will not self-incriminate on this platform, and I will not certainly let you come out here and defame me and libel me and slander me. Whatever else people start throwing out as words they don't fully understand. Maybe this is a HIPAA violation. I don't know what other acronyms I need to throw out here to try and throw you off my scent, but I won't let you do this to me.
All right, we'll get the full story on that one at a later date, because I mean, now our interest is piqued. We need to have a full rundown of what happened.
We'll get to it eventually. In the meantime, Jesse, let's get to the third here and celebrate something wholesome that my father did last night and get away from the sins of my past.
Yeah, so Senior, you had some serious drip on during the Chargers-Chiefs game. Are these Golic exclusive? You got in on the My Cause, My Cleats game, and they're looking quite fresh.
Yeah, you know, it is. The NFL does a great job with this for the 2 weekends. It lets players wear whatever cleats they want, and they usually get them dressed up to obviously talk about their cause, and they put it on their cleats, hence My Cause, My Cleats. And they let former players like myself who are in the media business in what I do, and they make tennis shoes for us. This is the second or third year I've done it, and they take the foundation that we're using and they put it in a way on the shoes. Now, some players have kids design their shoes. There's all different kind of designs. They can really kind of flare them up. But yeah, I had a pair of Nikes that had the Golic Family Foundation name on it, logo on it. Very proud of the foundation. That obviously my whole family, really my wife Chris, is spearheaded the whole thing. But our whole family is involved, and our thought is at Notre Dame, while you go to school at Notre Dame, you live in the South Bend area. It's home for 4 to 5 years, and we wanted to help the community there that reaches really all the way to Chicago, which is like an hour and a half away, and everywhere in between. And we probably help 20 to 25 charities or foundations a year through a golf tournament and through donations. So it's something as a family we're very proud to give back to the community around Notre Dame, which is really given me my family. My wife I met there, the kids all went there. I mean, so it's a very special place to us. So it was great that again the league does this and allows us to wear these shoes and really put it out there what our cause is. In my case, my cause, my sneakers, not my cleats. But I really admire the NFL for doing this and let players kind of show their platforms.
Yeah, certainly. And again, for the Golic Family Foundation, some of those charities, the Logan Center, the South Bend Center for the Homeless, Cultivate Food Rescue, the Humane Society of St. Joe County, the Ronald McDonald House of Michiana, all great groups there. And a great set of shoes there, Dad. Nice, clean look here. I like that. It kind of like Hitch. You stayed in your lane. You didn't try and do anything crazy here. They don't need, you don't need to be making pizza at the party. They got food there already. You stayed right between 10 and 2, and you got it done out there. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. I don't get out of my lane anymore. I stay right in it. It's normally the slow lane. I just see other cars zooming by me, and I just sit there and stay in the slow lane, and I'm good. I was really afraid of getting them. It was a light rain early on and natural grass. I was afraid of getting them dirty, quite honestly. I was being very, very careful where I stepped.
All right.
There you go. Listen, one of the parts of the sneaker game that people don't talk about nearly enough is trying to navigate that out in public while you're looking fresh in front of the crowd there. So managed to get it done, as Dad said. Awesome to see that from all the different players around the league. So many of the causes that are near and dear to them that they get to display and show a little personality